Hello, everyone, and a very warm good evening to you. A very warm welcome to the ETHRNextech Southeast Asia pre event LinkedIn Live discussion on the theme Journey from Adaptation to Innovation. Is Southeast Asia ready for Industry 5.0? I am Yasmin Taj, editor and head of branded content for ETHR International, and I'm extremely excited to be amongst all of you today. Do let us know where you are joining us from this evening in the chat box. And to those who have missed the buzz about ETHR1 Next Tech Southeast Asia HR Summit, presented by Advantage Club, it is a one of its kind conference conceptualized around the theme Adaptation to Innovation, scheduled for the 8th of December at Sheraton Imperial, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This mega event will explore the impact of emerging technologies on how we work, live, and interact, and how you can apply the lens of innovation to take your organization to the next level. If you have not registered yet, then do visit the website link shared in the chat box and book your seat. Moving on to our panel today, we have a prestigious lineup of HR leaders from the most dynamic organizations in Southeast Asia joining us today. So let me welcome on screen our esteemed panelists. First up, I'd like to introduce Norlida Azmi, Group Chief People Officer for Axiata. Then we have Fong Tuan Chen, who's Senior Executive Vice President, Group Human Capital for Maybank. Next up, we have Sukhveer Singh Ajay, who's Head of People and Culture for Food Panda Malaysia. Next, we have Ravi VS, who's founder, CEO, and Chief Foresight Strategist for School of Future Foresight. Then we have Raj Tanwar, who is CSO and Head HR for Advantage Club. Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Nolida, Ravi, Raj, Fong Tuan, and Ajay. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Great. So before I start the discussion and jump into my first question, I'd also like to request our viewers to keep sharing your thoughts and questions in the comments section. I will keep taking them up during our conversation today. And without further ado, let me start with my first question that I have for all our speakers on the screen today. So the last couple of years has brought about diverse changes in the HR industry. While 2021 was a year of reinventing HR and solidifying its new role, 2022 was all about pushing the boundaries of how HR can add more value. So how would you define the year 2022 for you as the HR leader and your team? And Nolida, since you're the only lady in the panelists, I'll come to you first.
Honored to be the first amongst all these great gentlemen. Thank you, Yasmin. And like you said, adaptation to innovation, what it has been for 2022 as a leader is really has been very exciting. If you ask for personal traits of as a leader and the team, is how do we move at pace, if not ahead, of those that we are enabling. We find that we need new solutions for our products and for our customers, and how do we therefore upskill and get the people up. So I think one of the things that has happened as a HR leader in the team is, can we pace up? Has our business acumen totally been sharpened on a dynamic basis? And therefore, I believe that this year has been, apart from the pivot, is trying to measure those returns on how HR has partnered, because the accountability is higher. I think we're at the top table, we're defining strategy, but how do you measure the impact? That's what I would say for the opening. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you, Nolida. That was a very interesting comment. I do agree that if you can't be ahead, at least be at pace with the changes that are happening around. And HR is at the forefront, at the center of all the change and transformation that is happening. So a great times for HR leaders to be in, I must say. I'd like to come to you, Fong Tuan. What are your thoughts on that?
Hi, thank you, Yasmin. Well, going second is not as bad as going last, so it's not too bad. I think 2021, you're right, is we were just coming out of the pandemic, and we all of us thought that 2022 would be much better. And actually, at least for us, 2022 has been even more challenging, because not only we are rebounding from the pandemic, we also have tremendous geopolitical tensions, severe inflation, and for Malaysia, additional turbulence, because we had to go through political turmoil as well, because we just completed our general election last weekend. And now, after a couple of days, more than a couple of days, we have a government. I think 2023 would be more interesting. I can tell you 2022 for us is just grappling with all these changes, just holding on to dear life, hoping that we would come out of it positively, which interestingly, HR has always wanted to be on the table or at the table not only that we were at the table, we were the table for much of 2020. Much of 2020 and 2021 expectation were higher. Now 2022, the expectation of HR is it's business as usual. We should be doing what we were already doing much better from before.
True.
But I can tell you, unfortunately, there are, as what Nolita said, keeping pace was already a challenge. Now, people are expecting, our CEOs and the boards are expecting us to be ahead of the game. We should be preempting all this. We should be understanding this before everybody else. And that will be the challenge going forward. I think 2022 is a good stepping platform for us to be even more influential in 2023 and beyond.
Great points again, Pongton. I totally agree with you. We are the table right now. HR has been in the center, as I said earlier, also. And as you said, the challenges will continue to be there. Disruptions will keep happening. If the pandemic got over, there were other disruptions that keep coming. And we will have to keep preparing ourselves to keep facing these as we go on. So great points there. Ajay, what are your thoughts on that? How has 2022 been for you?
Thanks, Yasmin. So I think very much aligned with my fellow speakers today. 2022 has been a year of it's been a very interesting year for us to say the least at Foodpanda. 2020, 2021 saw us developing things which we basically had very little time to conceptualize, right? And 2022 saw us solidifying whatever we had developed over the course of the last 2 years, right? I think Norlita said something very interesting about upskilling and making sure that you are able to sort of like keep up to those great legacies that we came up with. Right? I think many different organizations became like just ridiculously creative over the last 2 years. Like just building things out of thin air, right? While working remotely. And 2022 was the real test of. I mean, it was the real barometer to see whether or not those things were going to be sustainable, right? So as a leader, together with the team, it was super important to see whether or not those things, the concepts, the models that we had created was going to be sustainable, and whether or not it made sense in the evolving world of work, right? So that was 2022 in a nutshell, and I think a lot of us have spoken about HR being the table. Conventionally, human resources has always been referred to as a support function, right? And more often than not, you're not. I mean, you're called upon when crap hits the fan, right? But otherwise, you're not really there. However, the pandemic kind of like pushed the human resource function in a very good way into the forefront of an organization, because then human resources wasn't just support, it was strategic. I mean, we are the guys who had to like think about how do we move into remote working, a remote working like model overnight. I think for a lot of us, right? Like, and I think back in the day, working remotely used to be a benefit. I think a lot of us are like, oh, I have like remote working benefits. I can work from Timbuktu as long as I have like a good internet connection. And then boom, the pandemic comes in, and like we all had to work remotely to stay alive, right? And now it's become. I mean, HR had to like figure out like how were we going to pivot, and like without like HR input, there was the organization essentially could not move. And I think being a part of human resources, I've always almost like a broken record. I've always repeated this to my team that human resources is really essentially the heart of an organization. And if you stop pumping, the organization would stop functioning. But while I said it sounded nice in theory, but the pandemic really brought that, made it very real. So yes, we've become the table. 2022 has been a year of the 2020 and 2021 were 2 years of trial, and then 2022 was like solidifying like all of your experiments. So I feel like 2022 was, like Fong Tuan has said, it was the real test. Like coming back into a hybrid work model, seeing people dealing with all of the different challenges that we've had to deal with in the local landscape in Malaysia, right? Political, economic, and also moving up into like 2023 and things which are going to come our way. So I feel like 2022 has been a very interesting year. It's built a lot of character, and I think the biggest focus for us this year is like sharpening skill sets and not being threatened by the different mediums which have surfaced over the course of the last 3 years, right? It's so the
Absolutely.
mediums which have surfaced, being artificial intelligence, etc., is not here to supersede like human intelligence. It's here to help you. And like I think the goal throughout this year has been to find a way to like marry human competencies to that of artificial intelligence. So yeah.
True. Great points. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ajay. I think I also totally agree with you that 2020 and 2021 were more about adaptation, and that's what our theme for the conference is also. We were adapting to the changes that were happening to us, but 2022 became about how do you now sustain that? How do you solidify? How do you innovate more on that? And HR's role became all the more important during this time. So thanks for sharing that. Raj, what are your thoughts on 2022 and how has it been for you?
Yasmin, individually for me as a HR leader, and obviously now I'm a part of the business as a chief strategy officer. Since I work with more than 1,000 clients globally, I have seen 2022, 2021, and 22 slightly differently. And I'd say that up till year 2021, it was more of volatility and uncertainty because the pandemic hit and we did not know what to do. There's a lot of uncertainty, volatility that was happening. But year 2022 added the rest of CNA, which is complexity and ambiguity. And what happened that I have seen, there's a dramatic shift that happened from an HR strategic point of view, where the lot of employees who were wanting and a lot of employers who were offering employee engagement as an offering, they've moved from employee engagement to employee experience. There are a lot of employers who were talking about DEI at the core of the HR strategy. They moved from DEI to belongingness as a larger frame. I have seen employers talking about a brand, but from there they moved to competitive edge. A lot been talked about in year 2021 about well-being. 2022 employees started talking about and employers started talking about holistic care. What I mean by that is that well-being, everybody said, but well-being means different things to different people. For somebody, going to a gym is well-being. For somebody, maybe listening to a great music is well-being. So well-being means different things to different people. There are 8 dimensions of social well-being. We all know, well-being. We all know that social is one of them. The another shift that I saw is from a typical performance management system to moving over to a reward and recognition, which is making people feel good. From a typical benefit model to a flexi benefit model, from our rigid models and policies to hybrid policies. So what I would say in short, I have seen a larger focus on 3 Ps, which is people first, followed by certainly profits, and not needless to say, planet. I have seen a lot of focus around society. I've seen a lot of focus around helping others, ESG at the center of HR strategy. So I feel that 2022 has been a year of learning and it marries very well with the goal that we have set for us for Industrial 5.0. So that's my view.
Great to know that, and I'm happy to see that how organizations and progressive organizations here in Malaysia and all over Southeast Asia are gearing up for this kind of a transformation going forward. While again we adapted to what happened, next step forward, focusing on what are the 3 goals that you said very rightly. It was people, it was profit, it was planet. If I may add purpose also, because a lot of you people are looking for purpose at work. So if these are the core pillars if companies can focus upon, that's how the future will be shaped. So that's great thoughts.
Indeed.
Thanks, Raj. Ravi, coming to you not last but not the least, but what are your thoughts on this?
Uh, just lost you. I think I've
Ravi, can you?
just
Yeah,
lost.
can
Now
you hear
better.
me?
Right. What's the
Yeah,
question? Yeah, right.
yeah. How has 2022 been for you as a leader and your team? What changes have you seen?
I mean, apart from running this organization that I have got about 300 people working with me, and it's kind of an interesting kind of a perspective that we looked at. But the angle that we come from, the position that I come from, is that we prepare organizations for this kind of disruptions and whatever taking place and all that. We had a client in Malaysia in 2015, which we were preparing for this kind of a disruption taking place. And one of the case models down here. But the interesting part is, if you look at a book called Jim Collins, when he wrote a book called Good to Great, and he talks a story about a school bus. right? And he talks about school bus, and everybody talks about school bus, the driver being the CEO. And what I realized from the and whether you have the right people on the right bus, on the wrong people off the bus, it talks about whether people sitting in the right bus on the seats of the bus. But there's one area that we have that I've noticed in HR leaders in year 2021 and 22 is that the HR leaders have become the bus conductor. Jim Collins doesn't speak about bus conductors. Now I've seen HR leaders playing the bus conductor. They are playing a very strategic role, and they're doing it very fast. The turnaround speed that they've come up in the last 21, 22 is amazing to see what they have done. And the next stage is the data. We need to get the data. If we don't have the data, it's going to be a waste. These 2 years, the amount of data that is collected, but I mean, the HR leaders that you have there, Nolida and Fong Tuan and Jay and Raj down there, that needs to be collected, and what we can see from the data, that will be a powerful library for HR leaders coming forth the coming years.
Great points, Ravi. I must say yes. Data. I think a lot of focus has been put on data, especially while we are working in hybrid, remote workspaces. There are lots of people across the globe working for you. How do you make use of the data that you're getting, and what insights do you get out of that? How do you make use of those insights? I think that's going to be very, very important because people will continue to be our focus here. How do we make sure that we use that data to use and those insights coming out from the data to create experiences for our people that are worthwhile? So thanks, Ravi. Great point shared there. Moving on to my next question, and we were talking about how people, are a huge focus for organizations going forward. It's about future-proofing your employees. How do you prepare for the next disruption? How do you prepare your people for that? So my question is, how is your organization, and how should organizations work on their people strategy in the new world of work? Any best practices that you would like to share? Raj, I'd like to come to you first this time. You're on mute, Raj.
I'm sorry, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So, the emergence of Industry 5.0 has brought in a fundamental shift, and that shift is seen in the HR strategy too. And I'll share a couple of the best practices. To begin with, we have seen a complete shift from economic value to social value, from welfare to well being. And this larger focus that you see is predominantly happening because of three things that I see in the strategic move. One is human centric strategy design, the second is resilient strategy, and the third is sustainable. When I say human strategic centric design, is that what is happening? That there was a time when people were working for organizations, but now what is happening? Organizations is working for people because organization is making sure that people well-being is at the forefront. They are developed on time. They are retained. They see a career growth, and finally, and most important, they feel belongingness at work. So what has started happening that the strategy is more human-centric design, and they feel a lot more valued. And people where they feel valued and where they feel there is a purpose, there is a future, they stay there. So that's one shift that I see. The second is resilient, and where I come in from there is that I have seen organizations which stood this time. They became very flexible, agile. They became a very motive-driven organization. And once the motive are very clear, the entire ecosystem revolves and they match it. And the third and last important is sustainable. We need to make sure that there are planetary boundaries which are very well defined. Profits are not only the end mean of achieving it, and people read through it. And they make sure that if you are not aligned to the society larger objective, they stop working for you. We've seen in enough and more organizations. Now, let me tell you what is happening fundamentally, how things are changing. Hybrids, and I would say very often flexis, are the future of HR strategic change. What I mean by that? There was a time when learning used to be very rigid in terms of what is supposed to be taught. Learning have become completely flexible. That means my time, my device, my topic, and my choice. And we see enough number of marketplaces, solutions which are available today where learning is happening and learning engagement scores are as high as 80%, which are unheard of. People are learning from playing guitar to Web 3.0, robotics, and what's not. Everything is happening in name of learning. Same thing is happening with reward. Same thing. So what is happening? Same thing is happening with benefits. There was a time when benefits were offered as a bucket and people were supposed to pick out of the bucket. But now it is flexible. My choice, my money, my time. The same is exactly happening in wellness. I gave you an example a couple of minutes back. The second part is hybrids. When I say hybrids, means how is it emerging? The best practices that are emerging is even compensation. There are hybrids. There are people who are taking part of compensation as money, but part of compensation they're investing in their own future growth. And I have seen as a part of our platform that a lot of people who choose to learn and pick up more courses other than just taking money in salary. That's one. Second is hybrid. We all know in terms of work model what is happening. People working from home, working from office. Hybrids are not going to stop. They're going to be future furthermore. When we even look at employment models, there was a time when there was a full-time model and there's a contractual model. There are concepts like moonlighting which are already come and talked about in everywhere. So there are a lot of things which are changing, but at the same time, the organization, which I say very often, remain focused on these three aspects. And fourth, you beautifully added, which is people, profit, planet, and purpose. They are the one which are going to stay in longer run. So that's my view on the strategic point and how things are changing. Nature's
Great points, Raj. I think that the whole point about how human centric your strategy has to be, and how people are no longer working for you, organizations are working for people now. So it's all about the focus around people. How do you take care of them? How do you make them feel the the sense of belongingness? How do you bring that in? How do you map their career journeys? How do you align their goals to your own organizational goals? I think those are going to be very, very important. So great points, Raj. Ajay, any thoughts around this? What kind of people strategy are you looking at? You work for an organization which has thousands of employees.
Yeah, so I think Raj has like nailed it, right? I think it's there's been a paradigm shift here. It's no longer what you want, but more of what your team wants at this point, right? Like, so I think what Raj has said is just beautifully put together. We are no longer a people serving organization. We are now organization serving people. So it is very, very important to understand. For me in particular, my people strategy at the moment is one that is human centric, it's resilient, and it must be sustainable. Now, I think I, I'm often asked what is a best practice, and I think the bestest practice or the best advice that I could give anyone and everyone out there is there's no one size fits all sort of a situation. And I think organizations need to understand that it's not your agenda that you're going to be fulfilling at this point. You before you introduce or implement any form of any system, any form of like mediums across the organization, it's very important to understand what is it that the people want. I think Raj also mentioned something very interesting on good work, right? And that's the term that I use in building my framework here. And value has to be, I think, jobs right now, your professional capacity must add value also to your personal capacity, right? So building an organization that adds value to an individual both on both platforms, professional as well as personal, is super important at this point. Because if something does not add value to an individual, then I think this whole thing, it ties into like what we've experienced over the course of the last 3 years, right? Time has become so valuable, and like people no longer want to spend, or rather, I think the term that I use quite loosely right now is waste, right? Like people no longer want to waste their time commuting in traffic, being stuck at a 9 to 6 job anymore, unless they feel like it adds value to them as an individual and as a professional. So good work is super important, and like it's very important that managers are entrusted with that sort of ownership right now to make sure that the people in their respective teams feel like they're adding value to themselves by performing a task at work. It's not adding value to the organization anymore, right? So I think making sure that it's human centric, making sure that it's sustainable, it's resilient, those are like the people strategic initiatives that are in place for us right now. Good value is super important, and value cannot just be in a professional context right now. It has to also apply to their personal lives. So
Exactly.
if as an organization, if we're able to look at these things holistically, then we will be able to retain the headcount. But again, I say all this with a caveat of like, there's no one size fit all approach here, right? You need to assess everything depending on the demographic that you're dealing with, because we're dealing with people who have developed new passions, skills, and what have you during the pandemic, to like the new age of job seekers coming into the employment landscape. So everyone wants different things. Parents want different things. You know, the millennials want different things. Mothers returning to work want different things right now. People who started individual business throughout the pandemic want different things. So it's super important that we understand uh, what is applicable to who. I mean, everyone talks about flexible or hybrid working right now, but a very simple question to everyone who works in the HR space is the hybrid work model something which is applicable to everyone and anyone? Can it work for everyone? No. Like the guys who work in operations, it's not going to be applicable to them, right? So how do we then incentivize them for missing out on this hybrid work system? So it's super important that we
Yeah.
evaluate the whole thing and make sure it's sustainable. Yeah.
Great points again, Ajay. I think I love the value about adding
Yes,
value.
ma'am.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, sir.
can
Please.
I add something? What Raj and Ajay has shared, based on the work that we do, that's a black hole. It's a scary place to be in at the present moment. What they're sharing in the moment is a very high risk, and you're going into a very uncertain territory, because the reason is the word like sustainability and all this used for people development is a scary place to be in, because the reason is that's where the challenge is going to be. So whatever Raj has shared, that's another spectrum looking at it, that as a black hole, and you do not know and the gravity is going to pull you into another chaos structure, is going to fall into structure, and that's a conversation that we can have another time.
Yeah, absolutely, Ravi. Thanks for adding that in. But yeah, that is interesting. But I like the way that organizations are focusing on these aspects, which are very crucial. I'm sure yeah, there will be challenges on the way, but the intent is where it matters. And as Ajay rightly said, it's also adding value to an individual's life, his career, his family life, at the end of it all, adding value to the organization. So thanks for sharing that. I'd just like to welcome one of our speakers who just joined us, Shazli. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Sorry I'm late. Had some massive technical difficulties, but happy to be here with all of you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Shazli. So let me just introduce you once again to everyone here. We have Shazli Ghani, who's Cluster HR Director, Malaysia and Singapore for L'Oreal. So thanks, Shazli, for joining us. The conversation is going on. I'll just ask you to jump in here and answer this question that we are trying to address about people strategy. So can you tell us what is people strategy all about in this new world of work that has come up recently, and any best practices that you can share from your organization?
Thanks. I think for us, I would say the people strategy, if you look at the core basics of it, it hasn't changed from what everybody else is doing, which is how are you going to differentiate yourself to other companies? Because, at the end of the day, every company has your core basics of hygiene in what you do in HR, and you need to get those right before you can talk about, what kind of strategy that you can do. But I think moving forward, and what we've seen with the rapid pace of change in the world is that, companies now more and more are being expected to play a role in not just at what happens at work, but also in supporting the employees, also in their personal space, what happens at home, financials, mental health, and the companies that can really, I guess, who are not afraid to tackle some of the taboo topics as well, ensure that, they're able to stand in solidarity with the employees. Those are, I would say, the strategies that are really taking us forward. Not all of us have all the answers. I mean, there've been so many tried and tested methods, and, during the pandemic phase as well, everyone has really kind of looked to HR to have all the answers, and we are still trying to kind of figure it out ourselves. But what we see in the data, and when you speak to employees, is that is really, the how much are we also assisting them with their life outside of work. And I think that's the differentiated strategy that we're looking at.
Great point, Shazli. I think I totally agree. And I think Ajay also said that it's also about personalizing those experiences for your people. What is it that they want? What is it that, aligns with their own goals, their personal goals as well? So personalizing those experiences, personalizing their development journeys for them, these are going to be very core to the kind of people strategy you are developing in this current times. Any other thoughts from a panelist here? Nolda, anything you'd like to add to this about people strategy?
It's very interesting for us. I think the technical upskilling had to happen during the lockdown itself. What I find the upskilling that I have to do today is actually getting my people managers ready for the pivoted world. How many of them really understand that, when you can't just send me literature about being caring about other people and tell them to work at 6 p.m. or, you don't give them time to learn. So making them walk the talk for me is very important, not only at the senior leadership, but also at my board directors. Pretty much most of us here are Asians. There is a little bit of a deferential society. Like, we must accommodate senior leaders, we must accommodate directors. So I'm pushing back, and sometimes at the risk of my job, but it's okay. We have to make the difference, right? When do we say that enough is enough? And you can send me literature about burnout and everything, but you must walk the talk. So I'm
Yeah.
finding that a lot of the HR skills today is stakeholder management of influencing the walk the talk all the way up above and the people managers. I have to bring this up because it's a continuing battle for me. The other thing is very interesting is, I love the talk about this black hole, Ravi. It's like everybody talks about sustainability, but it takes me to go screaming like a shrew and says, why do we have plastic bottles? Do you know? And I says, oh, this boss asked me. I said, I don't care. You don't do it. You don't order it. So for me, when we say that you want to be sustainable, so these days, when I have millennials who ask me, what is your purpose? What is Axiata's vision on sustainability and inclusivity? Then I say to them, I will ask them back, what do you do today that actually exhibits this? As much as you demand from me, I have the right to ask of you because you're going to be part of the Axiata world. I can't use the word family these days because it shows that you don't respect the blurring between work and personal life, right? So there's a lot of things that we as HR leaders or practitioners must be walking the talk, right? So yesterday was a public holiday in Malaysia. I had to work. I fought anybody. I says, I will come, but I will not call anybody. And then I gave a lecture to these people. So it's lucky that I'm still here today. I still have a job. But I think somebody has to hold the boundary. And I think these are the new skills. Technical, I can do all sorts of availment. But these soft nuances that separates us, I think, is what's going to take us to be able to support all our programs. At least that's my passionate sentiment today.
Well, that's lovely. I think very, very important. As you said, leaders, people managers, you need to walk the talk if you want people to follow. And if you want people to understand, you have to have that empathy towards them. And that is what you will get in return. I think that's very, very important. The soft nuances and all that you pointed out. Great point there. Thank you so much. Fongton, I'd like to ask you another question now. So we've all seen how talent remains a fundamental driver of business success. And as employers continue to navigate through the ongoing disruptions, how can you think and companies address the overheated talent market globally? Great retention, resignation, attraction. There's so much happening. How can you address that?
First and foremost, I think the term talent is being redefined. Talent in the last, if you define talent 10 years ago, it would be extremely different from how you define talent now. For example, resilience is normally, orthodoxly, reserved for those operational people who has been there for a long time, so they know how to navigate. So you call them resilient. They are able to withstand political upheaval within the organization and outside. Now that is a requirement, and resilience is not just political resilience. It is also resilience in any shape, way, or form. So for that's one example. Type A personality, which I call those who are aggressive, the typical personality that when we go to assessment centers, we will choose them because they are the ones who speak. They are the ones who are ambitious. They are the ones who put their minds and their ideas forward. Now we are rethinking, how many type A's actually survived in the last couple of years when technically they can't use those skills? Because you don't have people to lead. You have tasks to do, and you have your entire work strata has changed. So that's the first one. Yeah, I think we are redefining it. Ravi, both Nolita and I like black holes. We all like black holes. We just don't know what we are getting ourselves into, and when we are sucked into a hyper gravitational pool and we can't come out of it, that's a problem. So we need to be very wary when we go into this. On the 8th, I'll be sharing on transformation. And one of the transformation that I'm talking about will be in talent. And I would probably give you a a teaser on what I would speak about is when we talk about talent, the first thing we think about is okay, retention of talent, right? And then how do we retain them? We develop them. We need to have a strong succession plan. We need to have leadership development, etc., etc. The usual stuff. Those are not black holes. Those are like they're not even white space. They are just what we do normally. The question is this: how do we even manage talent and succession when we don't even know what are the roles that are going to exist in the next 3 to 5 years? How do we plan for succession when we don't even know the capabilities that we are looking for? Yet we are still relying on, 9 boxes and things that has been there for like 20 years, right? I think, Ravi would probably jump in very soon. I think there's another black hole that we need to explore. Is we need to take this nomination talent management. We nominate people in succession plan. Those are obsolete. You ask the management, you ask bosses to nominate. They don't know any better. They probably will find clones of themselves. That's why succession planning, I call it cloning mechanism, because you continue to find the same people with the same skills, probably look the same way, talk the same way, and God forbid, come from the same school, in one school in one state where they wear the same tie every Thursday or Friday or whatever. And these are the people that are in succession plans. And that is not only dangerous, it is irresponsible. So how we manage talent going forward need to have a change of paradigm in terms of how we define talent. And secondly, we need to debunk some of these models that may not be relevant anymore in the post-pandemic new normal geopolitical upheavals that we're going through, when we don't even know what future holds for us. So we need to take a chance on gems that probably would not be immediately obvious.
That's interesting. I think, but that will remain a challenge, right, Wong Tuan? Because if you take a chance, you're not preparing well enough for the future. How do you know? When you said you don't know which jobs will exist, which roles will exist, now how do you prepare your organization for that? That's the big question. I think HR leaders, learning leaders, even CEOs for that matter, need to answer. Any other thoughts around talent and how the whole market, which is so heated up, can be managed better? How this whole transformation can be taken care of? Anyone in the
Yes,
panel
so
here?
I'll add on to that, and I think I'm very much aligned with Fong Tuan again here, right? Like, because conventionally we would look at people who come from like Ivy League schools, etc. With really good GPs and like very good like grades to occupy the map in our succession plan. And one thing that I haven't paid much attention to in the last 18 months at least is a succession plan at our Malaysian entity, because I don't think those things carry weight anymore. I think a successor for any one of the positions is someone who is going to be some versatility is something that I really look out for in individuals at the moment. So when it comes to like review cycles, etc., I look at an individual who is super, super versatile, someone who has been able to take on multiple roles, not at the cost of his or her livelihood, right? Like, but it's just more of like someone who's been able to upskill at their own time and pace, right? Like where they've sort of like expressed very clearly the intention to do better at their own cost, right? So I feel like the moment you have drive, then you know that this individual is going to be someone who is going to be a well-suited successor. And your job grades, like Fong Tuan had said, a bunch of people from the same school wearing the same tie, that's just not going to cut it anymore. If anything, the pandemic has taught us, I think things can be so. It's very hard to change mentalities, but like it's very easy to teach skills. So I would rather teach you and have you like groom yourself upward instead of like try and like change the way your mind operates, right? Because that just takes a lot of time. So, and I think this has also often been my advice to like job seekers, because in our positions, like a lot of universities want to partner with us. They're like, what should job seekers look out for this, at this time and age and stuff. And for me, it's always like, no job is beneath you, and learn as much as you can, right? And like it's super important that we move away from conventional stereotypes at this point, right? Like you don't. It's not necessary that you're a lawyer, doctor, engineer anymore, right? Like just become anything and everything, because that's really what's going to float your boat, right? So talent really. When I say talent right now, I don't mean that the person's talented. I mean the person has drive, the person has ambition, and the person is a self-starter. That is a talent to me right now.
Great. I think that's how we need to look at talent unconventionally, as you said. Look at for the unconventional traits that are going to work, because people who are resilient, who are agile, who can learn and become better. I think that's what we need to focus on. Great.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts before I move on to my next question? Raj, do you want to add something here?
Yeah, indeed. See, I have been a CHRO myself of more than 110,000 people working across 7 countries, which included Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I design my strategy, and specifically we talked a lot about black hole and talent. See, there are two ways of looking at it, because, as I said, my transition has been from a CHRO to a business leader, now to a strategy person. I look at it from a red ocean or a blue ocean strategy when I prepare my HR strategy. One,
Mm-hmm.
when I look at it red ocean, where I know in which market I'm competing, which is my competition, how to beat it, what are the existing demand that are there in the market, what are the cost value addition that I'm doing, and last and most important, what the anchors that I need to support my business to win it. Now, when I look at blue ocean strategy, and that fundamentally defines how do you handle a VUCA kind of an environment, which is vulnerable, uncertain, and ambiguity exists in that environment where you do not know what is the market that you're contesting for. Is the competition relevant for you or irrelevant, or you are creating a new segment altogether? What is the kind of demand that you're creating, either through data purpose, like for that matter of fact, data backward integration, forward integration, for that matter of fact, you're starting a new channel altogether, you don't know. What is the cost value drivers which are differentiating your business? And last and most important, the difference in between, Yasmin, and that's my view, between great to, I would say, sustainable organization is fundamentally talent. And this talent would define in these uncertain circumstances how leaders stand up. Not only they care for their people, they care for their shareholders. And by the end of the day, they create a larger value and purpose for the society. So that's my belief. I've seen it working. I've seen in all 3 phases. And I think that's where the future lies.
That's a great approach that you've spoken about, Raj. Thank you so much for sharing. Shazli, did you want to add anything to this about the whole talent perspective?
Yeah, I did. I think, some very good thoughts shared. And, like Jay quite rightly pointed out, some of the old tools that we were used to, for example, succession planning, I mean, is dying or kind of dead, and the organizations need to be more agile in terms of how we adapt or how we are going to attract talent. And if I combine that with what Fong Tuan said, is that a lot of the capabilities that we want or we're looking for in the organization, we want to attract, we want to build, but at the same time, we don't have it yet. And, the challenge is trying to find someone in the organization who can then lead, mentor, coach the people who you want to bring in. And I'll give you a simple example. Here at L'Oreal, we have this competition and platform we call Brandstorm, which is a global internship program. And, interns from all over the world compete on several topics, typically related to the industry, of course. Last year, it centered around sustainability very heavily. And this year, if I look at the topics, it's AR, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, metaverse, things like beauty technology, virtual try-on, because the world of cosmetics makeup has evolved. People would go into a store, you would try it on. Now you don't need to. You upload a picture of yourself onto the website, and you can try infinite number of shades of lipstick. But the reality is, we're getting the interns to come in, compete on these topics, and then the light switched on for us is that yes, we will get them in. We need these capabilities, but how are we going to continue to nurture and build it? Because they will then be joining a workforce that didn't have these skills. So that the classic approach of, okay, you assign someone a coach, you assign someone a mentor, or you put them into a traditional training program, is not going to work. So we are now kind of, really pushing ourselves to see how we are going to change, revolutionize this, because we need these skills at the end of the day. We need to find some way to nurture it, and it needs to continue to stay relevant and help us push the boundaries. So I would say that's the really the key challenge that's going to keep me up at night for the next couple of years at least.
That's very interesting. I think the entire aspect of talent transformation that we're talking about, it actually starts from firstly identifying the kind of talent you want, looking again, acquiring that kind of talent, then developing that kind of talent, and finally retaining that kind of talent. So that's the whole, the whole spectrum of talent transformation today, and leaders have to look at that in that ways. Moving on to, I think in the interest of time, I'm moving on to my final question for this discussion, though we could have gone on. We are talking a lot about an impending recession. 2023, everyone's talking. While there were whispers going around, now it's becoming a little more clearer that it is going to be a year that could be the year of recession. And also, how will HR transform accordingly? So my question to you, all our leaders, I'll ask all our speakers to add on to here. As we move out of the pandemic, the economy is expected to enter a recession. What are some challenges that the recession might pose for HR functions, especially? And secondly, what, according to you, would be the new rules of HR and work, especially in your market, in this new world of work? And Ravi, I'd like to hear you first now. You're on mute. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. Based on what we have done and what we have seen across globally, right? Three information. Since the Second World War, whatever has happened just before COVID-19, whatever you have learned is no more relevant. Right? Things have changed. You have to rewrite your playbook. Number one, and the entire playbook has been rewritten again. Number two, the recession. Yes, everybody speaks about the Great Recession, and Malaysia is going to be the real dip or something like that. That's the conversation taking place. The playbook has to be written. I think the COVID-19 is a big example, and most of us have actually learned from that. I think most of the HR leaders have actually gained their insights. They know they are well prepared for it. I've seen them what happening. Number three, succession planning. When you're at work, you need to look at foresight planning. All right, that's the third fundamental. Foresight planning is important. And number four, data. Need to get your data. All right, the data contains a lot of noise. You need to know where the noise is and extract the noise, and that will give you the solution that you're looking for.
Great points, very rightly would. Ravi, I'd quickly come to you. Nolita, what are your thoughts about, firstly, the impending recession, how it will impact the HR function, and then what will be the new rules of HR?
I think trying to protect jobs is going to be very key. And therefore, modes of engagement that at least where the people who wants to work as gig workers and part-time or contract people should not be saying, do I give 50% of benefits if they only work 50%? Come on, we've been debating this for the last 10 years. Get on with it. Give some formula, you'll win some and you'll lose some. Jobs recrafting will ensure also that it gets up. So I think these are the things that we already have to do in the digital space, right? I think we have learned early enough that data is really important. One of the topics I had at one of my conferences was how to keep the CFO happy. We want investment in our HR programs, right? So yes. Then, and maybe the mindset, we always talk about business acumen, like what does it really mean? And I'm saying is, can my HR colleagues really articulate a narrative that the CFO said, okay, so it's very simple, right? If you don't want to give me the money, it's okay, but understand their repercussions. And I think what the new rules of HR and work is, how do we really incorporate our employees' voices into the solutions that we talk about? Recently somebody talked about the black hole of sustainability. Today we had a session, oh my God, and I'm thinking, as great as you think you are, we have not heard enough. Hearing a 25-year-old perspective on what DEIB, because now it's no longer diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not enough, right? You have to have a sense of belonging. I'm like, okay, the rules change for us as HR leaders, but you know what? I think it's going to be an exciting journey. And I think what this has really given us, the reset, is just an acceleration to do things. And I agree with Fong Tuan. I hate this talent management, succession management. I actually don't really believe that org structures, if you don't have succession, are really going to work, because we talk about agility, right? and then they audit you and say, oh my God, your job description doesn't match your KPI. I'm like, seriously, we are so out of whack. So I think the alignment is not just amongst HR. I think we have to bring the business people into these conversations. Don't audit me that my JD don't miss my KPI because you want me to be flexible and agile. So I think it's going to be a little bit of continuation to 2023 of alignment. I think the HR people have pretty much, how do we build the alignment? Those are the new rules of engagement. I see more courageous conversations that HR is really about the business.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nolita. Fong Tuan, I'd like to hear you next.
Okay. Firstly is recession, right? Well, recessionary pressures, it's cyclical anyway. So if anybody said like, oh, 2023 is going to be bad, and well, be real. Every 5, 6, 10 years, a big one comes every decade. A mini cycle comes every 3 years. So it's going to happen anyway. Well, companies continue to grow. People continue to have jobs. So we shouldn't be overly, just excited or obsessed with what should be done because of the pressures. Now, what we should be doing is ensuring, like what Nolita said, that our people are equipped. Therefore, jobs are then, organizations should not be protecting those jobs. The people themselves have to protect their own jobs by continue to build and equip themselves and upskill, right? And we provide a platform so that they are able to get that required skills at the required time. So that's what I think. From a playbook perspective, I think HR and business, there's also there's a need to blur that line. I think business is HR, HR is business, and there is no distinction. When we put the distinction in, that's when the audits will come in and said, well, you got to get this done, and businesses said like, your job is to support me. And interestingly, businesses have only two things that they want HR to do, regardless of all of us are trying to say we need to be strategic and so on. But deep down inside, whatever they say, and deep down inside, they just need us to do two things: one, hire people, and fire people. That's it. Because they are the businesses think that they are the best HR people, that they don't have to go to school to do HR. So they think they are the best HR people around, because they don't like to fire people because it's tough conversations, and in case they do it, they may end up in court. So they ask us to do it. When they hire people, because then they have zero accountability, because they have absolute deniability when they hire somebody, and when they don't turn up, it's HR's fault. So those blurring of distinctions and demarcation needs to happen. And I think the policy of putting HR into the business, and it has to take that chance to put people into business, and people from the business do HR full time, not as an assignment, but to take on a full-time job and fire people for once, and hire people for once, and then take responsibility for their hiring and firing. And then I think this will be much better in the future. And lastly is the new playbook. I think the playbook for HR is not even a HR playbook. It is entirely a sustainability playbook, and it's a black hole. And Nolita was saying it's no longer DEI, right? It's no diversity, equity, or inclusion, because at its purpose there is other things, engagement and so on. I'm a Star Wars fan, so I normally call DEI. I don't use that in that particular sequence. I call it EDI, and there's a J in front of the EDI, so it becomes a Jedi. So it is justice first, then equity, then diversity, then inclusion, but justice first. And that is where I think our challenge is, to ensure not only equitable across, but justice needs to be seen to be done as
Absolutely.
well. Doing it at the back end, like what HR does normally, is insufficient. We need to be at the forefront, showing that some of this stuff are being seen to be done. I think that's our challenge, and I really, really hope that going forward, 2023, 2024, all of us have the courage, have the gumption to get this done, and stand up to the CEOs and the boards to do what's right for the organization, for our people, not just for the company.
Great points. Thank you, Pongkan. Thank you so much. Yes, Raj.
I am loving this. The thoughts that are coming all across, simply awesome, amazing. It took me back to almost a decade back when I was the CHRO of a pharma company. And I was meeting my CEO and I was like presenting him the HR strategy, saying that, hey, this is the best HR strategy that I have prepared in my career. And then here it goes. So at that point of time, we used to prepare HR strategies in, kind of old PPT versions and some papers. So I gave it to him and he kept all the papers aside. I said, what happened? Why did you keep them aside? He said, do you know the business that I'm in? I said, yeah, we know. We are in pharma. So he said, when people are happy, they party hard, they need medicines. When people are sad, they get grim and they need medicines. So I'm in a relevant business where there is a recession or there is no recession. Medicines are going to sell. And first, let's understand the business that we are in. And believe you me, that changed my whole perspective as an HR leader. It's the same world today that we are in. On one side, we are talking about what a beautiful dichotomy that we are in. We are talking about lockdown in China. On the other side, we are talking about economies opening up. On one side, we are talking about retention, great resignation. On the other side, we are firing people. We know what's happening all across, including Twitter. On one side, we are talking about talent availability is not there. On the other side, we are talking about layoffs that are happening. We are talking about job safety on the other side, and concepts like quiet quitting are already troubling us. We are into a very different kind of an arena. We need to be prepared for what business that we are into. If the business is relevant to whatever business that you do, your stakeholders, your customers, you're clear what you're doing. Believe you me, your strategy would define that whether the recession is going to hit you hard or you will sail across recession. That's my personal view. I completely agree. Recession is a cyclical thing that's going to come. And it's going to come every now and then. Every 5 years, 10 years, it's going to come. So we are in a very, very different. I think now let's talk about some fundamentals or some tips that I'd like to share that we should do. One, I strongly believe we should do right manpower planning rather than letting people go. You should quickly go back to the drawing board and do a quick manpower planning and see. Hiring and firing people is easy, but people who are already there with you and people who business needs, you need to quickly go back and do that. So if I were still a CHRO and recession is coming ahead, I'll quickly do a manpower planning, understand where I'm at. Second is critical skills availability. During recession, my learning is that one side you have to let people go, on other side you don't have relevant skills that you need. So quickly fill your bucket with critical skills that you need in the recession time. The third is from wellness, go to hypercare or holistic care. People need support all time high because there is an environment around you which is talking negative. There's news around you which is impacting everyday life. And as an HR leader, I'd make sure that I create a hypercare environment for my people so I'm recession immune. Internal communication has to be all time best. People should be able to connect with you and understand what is happening in my organization. Believe you me, most of the time recession impacts you the most because people don't even know what is happening in the organization, how well you are prepared. So if you do that, great, thumbs up for that. There are two more factors I would add. One, tech infusion sometimes saves and helps in recession, and there are lot many case studies and lot many my own personal experience which are there. But last and most important, whenever even you let a person go, let the person go with a lot of respect. Do your best, whatever you can do. There are alternates which are available in terms of outplacements. Give people extended insurance, give people extended month's salary, let them sustain for some time. So even if they go, they respect you all the time as an employer that you have been for them. So that's my view on recession and what should you do to handle recession.
Thank you, Raj. Very nicely put together. Thank you. Coming to you, Shazli.
Yeah, I think Raj really captured a lot of key important points, especially around communication and how we're supporting employees through it. And if you think back to it, what really happens during a recession? Everybody tightens their belts, which unfortunately is quite counterintuitive to what would get the economy out of inflation. But we've discussed the business angle. The other angle that I also like to employ is really what's going on through the mind of the employee during a period like this, a recession, a slowdown. And I think there's been no greater teacher for us than the pandemic itself. What we are going to employ or what we expected to employ is things that we have already seen and encountered during the recession. We did not cut salaries, we kept people in employment. But more than that is the behavior changes that happen. And this is linking back to what I said earlier about, topics that are probably more taboo that, we don't typically touch on a normal basis. But, even COVID forced us to look at that. Before that, how many companies really looked at employee assistance programs or mental health programs for the employees? And then, with COVID, that became, something that was a must-have, and, not even a kind of a testing phase and something that, companies need to provide to employees. But what you also see if you look at the data during periods of recession is not only mental health gets affected, financially, of course, people then go into a lot of trouble, and especially if you have, I would say, your frontline staff are the ones that are the most impacted by something like this, and they're the ones who are, I would say, probably also the most likely to get into financial difficulties, who would then resort to, looking for sources of money to tide them over elsewhere, and if they don't do it right, that lends them into more trouble. Then that trouble hangs on them. They bring it into the workplace, and so which is why I said, all more and more employees or employers are starting to be seen as, how can we help employees through this period so that they don't have, that negative impact from their personal front, brought into the company as well. There are also other things, taboo subjects in Asia, like, a very good classic example is things like domestic violence, for example. And so, globally, we talked about implementing a policy in countries that, how do we put in place a structure to support employees who might be facing something like this, because, all too often it happens, but here we don't want to talk about it. And that was the same for things like, mental health support as well. So I think if we are not ready to kind of tackle these difficult conversations, put it on the table and tell the employees that, look, we are here to support you through all these, and these you typically see spiking through, a recession, through a crisis. Then it's I would say less easy to sleep at night saying, what, we've done our best for our employees. So I think that's another angle that, if we are not diving into the mindset of what the employees experiencing during periods such as this, then sometimes we might miss the mark. Right, but yeah, that's my 2 cents worth on how we tackle these kind of critical moments.
Great, thanks, Shazli. Ajay, finally, it's your turn.
So sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so I think focusing just solely on the recession, what I feel what you focus on grows, and like it's going to be quite an interesting time for us to manage the things that we have already implemented as HR practitioners, while also juggling the uncertainty of the recession that we're going to be, stepping into. So if I want to focus on, if I just was to pinpoint on, the kind of foreseeable challenges, is being able to maintain and upkeep the things that we've already implemented. So I think in the last 2 years, all organizations became very, very generous with the kind of things and that we were able to extend to our employees, right? Like the focus moved a lot to mental health, for instance, right? Like and well-being was something like Raj said earlier. It's not just economic or material, it's really holistic, right? Like, so it's holistic well-being is something which is very important. So right now, in light of the recession, it's super important for HR leaders to reevaluate things that are good to have, must-haves, and nice to have, right? Like, so these are 3 different buckets which I am just going to be focusing my time on, right? Like, because it is very important that your organization remains relevant, and while all of the things that you've implemented are still sustainable. Now, retaining talent, on the other hand, I feel instead of it being intangible, you really need to like put a sort of like a tangibility element to it, where people really feel connected to the cause and the work that they're going to be doing. Now, you want to, I think Nordlida also said something about we are going to be moving into gig economies. People are going to start looking at multiple income streams. They're going to do everything and anything within their control to to float through the times ahead. So as organizations, it's super important. The challenge will be finding a way to support your people through the turbulent times. So like systems, models, frameworks, all of that aside, it's very important to put the human in human resource, the people in people
Yes.
in the year that's going to come. So that's just going to be my focus. I'm keeping it very simple, keeping it very chic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. On that note, I think that was all the time we had for this wonderful discussion. There was so much to learn, especially on how, while 2022 forced us to reset, reimagine, and rewrite the playbook, 2023 again will be about going back to the drawing board and also continuing on the path with the focus on people, profitability, sustainability, purpose. As all of you rightly said, it's about understanding your business better, doing proper manpower planning, doing your best for your people, ensuring that they're equipped, ensuring that they're learning, they're upskilling themselves to remain relevant. Because in these times, in times of crisis, what you do and how you take care of people is something they're going to remember in the long run. So because time will change, they'll come back. There'll be it could be an employees market and employers market, because the cycle will keep going on. So it's again going to, the whole focus on people will ensure that no matter what disruptions keep happening, they'll keep coming and going. It's about organizations to be that thoughtful and how they take care of people in times like this. So on that note, thank you so much, Nolida, Ravi, Raj, Pongtuan, Ajay, and Shazli. It was such a wonderful conversation. And I know we stretched much beyond time, but there was so much to learn from you. I just couldn't stop.
Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Thank you,
Yasmin.
everybody.
Yasmin.
Thank you,
Thank you
Ismail.
very
Thank you,
much.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, Ismail. Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. And
Bye
thank you to
bye.
all our audience members for joining us. Do block your diaries to meet all of these wonderful speakers on the 8th of December at Sheraton Imperial, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, at the ETHR World Next Tech Southeast Asia HR Summit. A special thanks to our presenting partner, Advantage Club, our gold partner, Paradox, our community partners, CHRP, Asia, HRM, and HRTech.sg. Till then, stay safe, everyone. Keep learning. See you on the 8th of December for an entire day of learning and networking. Thank you, and bye bye.